His body was buried under a toilet for 17 years. Not a tomb, not a crypt, a latrine in the palace he once ruled. His name was Haile Selassie. 1 million people still worship him as God. His grandson lives in a Virginia suburb and holds the title Head of the Imperial House of Ethiopia, a house with no throne, no palace, and no country willing to give either one back. This is what happened to Africa's oldest dynasty after it fell. Somewhere in the suburbs of the Washington, D.C. metro area, an elderly man in his 70s lives a life so ordinary it barely registers. He keeps no staff. He holds no office. His neighbors, if asked, would probably describe him as quiet. His name is Sahle-Selassie. He is the grandson of a man who was worshipped as God. Not figuratively, not metaphorically. Right now, in 2026, roughly 1 million people across the globe, from Kingston to Nairobi to the hills of Ethiopia itself, believe his grandfather was the returned Messiah, the living incarnation of Christ on earth. They wear his image on medallions. They sing hymns in his name. They have done so, unbroken, for nearly a century. His grandfather was Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, King of Kings, heir to a dynasty that claimed 3,000 years of unbroken descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. He addressed the League of Nations. He graced the cover of Time magazine twice. He commanded an empire of 30 million. And on a September morning in 1974, soldiers drove him out of his own palace in the back of a Volkswagen Beetle. What happened after that to the emperor, to his children, to his grandchildren, and to the dynasty that ruled Ethiopia for 700 years is one of the most brutal royal collapses of the 20th century, and almost nobody outside Ethiopia talks about it. For 700 years, the Solomonic dynasty sat on the Ethiopian throne. 700 years. To put that in perspective, when Yekuno Amlak founded the line in 1270, the Magna Carta was barely 50 years old, and the Ottoman Empire didn't exist yet. The dynasty's legitimacy rested on a single extraordinary claim: descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, documented in the Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's 14th century national epic. Whether the genealogy was historical or mythical mattered less than the fact that millions believed it. Haile Selassie, born Rastafari Makonnen in 1892, was crowned emperor in November 1930 at St. George's Cathedral in Addis Ababa. He was styled the 225th ruler of that line. The ceremony lasted 3 days. By the 1960s, Selassie had built himself into one of the most recognizable leaders on the planet. He helped found the Organization of African Unity. He spoke before the United Nations General Assembly. His face appeared on Time magazine's cover. In Jamaica, a religious movement bearing his birth name, Rastafari, declared him the returned Christ. He never denied it. He never confirmed it either. But inside Ethiopia, the palace was rotting from within. A famine in Wollo province in 1973 killed an estimated 200,000 people. The government hid it. A BBC documentary exposed it. The footage, skeletal children lying beside roads while the emperor fed meat to his dogs, shattered whatever legitimacy remained. The military moved in stages. First came the arrests. Generals, ministers, provincial governors pulled from their homes one by one through the spring and summer of 1974. Then, on September 12th, a group of junior officers calling themselves the Derg drove to the Jubilee Palace. What happened next is one of modern history's most deliberately humiliating images. The emperor, 82 years old, nearly blind, frail, was led out of the palace he had built for his own silver jubilee. The soldiers did not put him in an armored vehicle. They did not use a military convoy. They placed the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah in the back seat of a blue Volkswagen Beetle and drove him away. A small crowd watched in silence. According to historian Harold Marcus, the emperor said nothing. He would never leave captivity again. 2 months later, on November 23, 1974, The Derg executed 60 of the emperor's closest officials by firing squad at Kirchela prison, a place Ethiopians called Alam Bekang, farewell to the world. Among the dead, the former prime minister, the head of the crown council, and several members of the imperial family. Their hands were tied. They were buried in a mass grave. The dynasty that had claimed the blood of Solomon ended not with a war, not with a siege, but with a Volkswagen and a volley of gunfire. And then the Derg turned their attention to the emperor himself. Haile Selassie spent his final year alive in the place he had once ruled. The Derg kept him confined inside the Jubilee Palace grounds, the same compound where he had received heads of state, the same gardens where he had walked his lions. Now the gates were locked from the outside. On August 27, 1975, Ethiopian state radio announced that the former emperor had died of complications from a prostate operation performed 2 months earlier. He was 83. Almost nobody believed it. The dominant account, repeated by multiple historians and later cited in reference works as fact, is that Haile Selassie was strangled on the orders of Mengistu Haile Mariam, the Derg's rising strongman. No autopsy was made public. No independent physician was allowed near the body. The emperor's personal doctor, according to accounts compiled by Harold Marcus, was not present at the time of death. What happened to the body was worse than the killing. For 17 years, from 1975 to 1992, the remains of the man once worshipped as God incarnate lay sealed in concrete beneath a latrine on the Menelik Palace grounds. Not a tomb, not a crypt, a toilet. The Derg buried him vertically, encased in cement, under the floor of a lavatory that Mengistu's staff reportedly continued to use. The imperial women fared only slightly better than the corpse. Princess Tenagnuwerk, the emperor's own daughter, was arrested along with her daughters, Aida, Seble, Sophia, Hirut, and other female relatives. They were held first under house arrest, then transferred to Alam Bekan prison. Princess Seble Desta, who had studied at Lady Margaret Hall, Oxford, spent 14 years in a cell she later described in terms that a 1988 Spectator article recorded plainly. Rats fell from the roof onto their beds at night. 10 women. One 15-foot cell. No trial, no charges, no sentence. Just years. The men of the family received no such half-mercy. Prince Iskender Desta, a rear admiral and the emperor's grandson, was among the 60 executed on Black Saturday. He was 31. Crown Prince Asfal Wasson, the emperor's eldest son and heir, survived only because he was already outside the country. He had suffered a massive stroke in 1973 and was receiving treatment in Geneva when the coup happened. He never fully recovered. He lived in London for years, then moved to McLean, Virginia, to be closer to the growing Ethiopian diaspora around Washington, D.C. In April 1989, in a modest ceremony in London, he accepted the title Emperor in Exile. He would hold that title for 8 years. He died in Virginia on January 17, 1997. He was 80 years old. He had not set foot in Ethiopia since 1973. His body was flown home for burial at Holy Trinity Cathedral. The Ethiopian government refused state honors. They would not even acknowledge his imperial title. The palace gates that had once opened for him remained, quite literally, someone else's property. When the Derg finally collapsed in 1991, overthrown by the same kind of armed revolt that had brought them to power, the surviving members of the Solomonic dynasty faced a question that no textbook could answer. The monarchy was gone. The constitution that replaced it made Ethiopia a federal republic. There was no throne to reclaim. So what, exactly, were they supposed to be? The answer depended on which branch of the family you asked. Zira Jakob Amha Selassie, the old emperor's grandson and son of the dying crown prince, had been named acting crown prince and heir presumptive in the final weeks before the coup. He was 21 in 1974. Educated at Eton, then Oxford, then Sandhurst, the training grounds of British officers, he had been groomed for a throne that evaporated before he could sit on it. After his father's death in 1997, the Crown Council recognized him as head of the Imperial House. The title carried weight in exile communities and among Ethiopian monarchists. It carried nothing in Ethiopian law. His cousin Ermias Sahle-Selassie took a different path. Ermias, another grandson of Haile Selassie, had grown up partly in the United States. He studied at UC Santa Barbara and the Fletcher School of International Affairs. He built a career in investment banking and government relations. And he took over the Crown Council of Ethiopia, transforming it, over the next decade, from a monarchist restoration movement into something closer to a cultural heritage foundation. According to the Council's own charter revision of July 28, 2004, the mission shifted formally, no longer political restoration, but preservation, development, and humanitarian work. Not everyone in the family agreed with that pivot. The monarchist current never fully died. Asfaw Wasson himself had founded a movement called Moa Anbessa, Conquering Lion, in 1991, explicitly aimed at restoration. Online communities of Ethiopian monarchists, some with over 100,000 followers, continued to argue that only a constitutional monarchy could unite Ethiopia's fractured ethnic politics. But the movement had no army, no party, and no realistic path to power. Meanwhile, the body of the emperor remained in a church crypt, visible to anyone willing to pay a deacon a few dollars for a viewing. That changed on November 5, 2000, 25 years after Haile Selassie's death. A funeral procession wound 10 kilometers through Addis Ababa, past Meskel Square, past St. George's Cathedral where he had been crowned in 1930, and on to Holy Trinity Cathedral, the church he himself had built as his intended resting place. Veterans of the old Imperial Guard marched in formation. Warriors in lion mane headdresses formed a guard of honor. Rita Marley, widow of Bob, flew in from Jamaica. The Ethiopian government sent no representative. No official spoke. Weeks earlier, the state had issued a public statement accusing the dead emperor of squandering Ethiopia's wealth. 3,000 people came anyway. The grandson who thanked the mourners was Baida Mariam Mekonnen. He stood at a microphone in a cathedral his grandfather had built, burying a man whose body had spent 17 years under a toilet, and spoke to a crowd the state refused to acknowledge. The family had their funeral. They still did not have their country. In November 2022, something happened that no one in the Solomonic line had expected from the Ethiopian state. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, at a Pan-African ceremony in Addis Ababa, posthumously honored 17 African leaders who had shaped the continent's independence movements. The first name on the list, ahead of Nkrumah, ahead of Nyerere, ahead of Mandela, was Haile Selassie. Prince Ermias Sahle-Selassie flew in to accept the honor on behalf of the family. He did not enter the Jubilee Palace as its owner. He entered as a guest. The palace where his grandfather had been seized, where his grandfather's body had been buried under concrete, had been renovated with French government funding and reopened, first as the National Palace, then, after a 5-year restoration, as a public museum managed under a project called Unity Park. In January 2025, the museum opened its latest wing, a display of the emperor's personal car collection. Roughly 80 vehicles, vintage Rolls-Royces, a fleet of Mercedes, rare models from the 1930s and 1940s, now sit behind ropes for tourists to photograph. The cars once belonged to the dynasty. They now belong to the state. So does everything else. The Menelik Palace compound, where Selassie was imprisoned and where his body was hidden, reopened as Unity Park in 2019. The land itself, all land in Ethiopia, remains state property under both the Derg's 1975 nationalization and the 1995 Republican Constitution. Nothing has been returned to the family. No lawsuit has succeeded. No restitution process has begun. The descendants have adapted in different ways. Ermias, now in his mid-60s, operates from the Washington, D.C. area, where the Crown Council is registered near Alexandria, Virginia. In 2024, he launched the Royal Ethiopian Trust, a U.S.-registered 501c3 charity, focused on heritage and development. He has twin sons, born in 1992. He is, by any measure, the most publicly active member of the family, giving interviews, attending ceremonies, maintaining the council's website and social media presence. Zira Yaqub, the recognized head of the Imperial House, is his opposite. He keeps almost no public profile. Recent sources, a 2024 reference citing a family gathering in Addis Ababa on October 21st, suggest he may have returned to Ethiopia. But the record is contradictory. A 2011 profile in The Independent placed him in a modest home on the Isle of Dogs in London. A 1998 article in Marie Claire described him living in Manchester in straitened circumstances. He is divorced. He has one daughter, Princess Lidetta, and no male heir. His heir presumptive is his cousin Prince Mikhail, Duke of Harar, who inherited that position after his elder brother died in November 2021. The man who holds the title, Head of the Imperial House of Ethiopia, has not given a major interview in years. Then there is the generation that straddles both worlds. Prince Joel Dawit Makonnen, a great-grandson born in Rome in 1982, graduated from Howard University's law school and married Ariana Austin, an American, in 2017. He works in heritage and philanthropy. In Frankfurt, Asfa Vossen Asseret, a grandnephew whose father was executed on Black Saturday, built a career as a political analyst and author. His 2015 biography of Haile Selassie, published by a major press, remains one of the most carefully sourced accounts of the dynasty's final decades. He wrote it from Germany because he cannot write it from home. 1,000 miles from all of them, in Shashemene, a town south of Addis Ababa where Haile Selassie granted 200 hectares to Jamaican Rastafari settlers in 1948, the faithful still gather. They celebrated his 133rd birthday in July 2025. Many of them do not believe he died at all. The grandson accepts humanitarian awards in his name. The faithful insist he never left. The Jubilee Palace has a gift shop now. You can buy postcards of the throne room. You can photograph the emperor's 1960s Rolls-Royce through a velvet rope. On weekends, families from Addis Ababa walk the gardens where Haile Selassie once kept his lions. The same gardens where soldiers put him in a Volkswagen and took everything. The entrance fee is modest. The descendants do not collect it. In Virginia, Ermias Sahle-Selassie files the paperwork for a 501c3 that bears the word royal in its name. In Addis, or London, or wherever Zira Yaqub has settled this year, the head of the Imperial House holds a title recognized by a council, honored by no constitution, and printed on no passport. In Frankfurt, Asfa Vossen Asseret writes books about a grandfather he never got to bury properly, in a language that is not his own, for readers who will never visit the country he cannot return to. In Shashemene, Rastafari elders tell their children that the King of Kings never died. 700 years of dynasty, 52 years of aftermath, 80 vintage cars behind museum ropes. The palace gates still open every morning. They open for tourists now. And somewhere, a 72-year-old man who was once named heir to the throne of Solomon carries a title that means everything to a few thousand people and nothing at all to the state that took it away. He has never sat on the throne. The throne no longer exists.